everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. I had the honor to interview an extraordinary woman live in person at the AMAC National Conference, which was hosted in Orlando, Florida. She is an award-winning national and international investigative reporter who covers national security, terrorism, immigration, and other cutting-edge issues. She was also on the front lines coverage of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Currently, she is an investigative reporter, Fox News contributor, and hosts her own show. We are thrilled to have her with us again today, a dear friend of AMAC's, Sara Carter, an extraordinary patriot and source of unique insight. Sara, we're so excited to have this opportunity to sit with you now.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm really happy. This is awesome.
And what is so lovely and wonderful about you is that you really are in a very unique position to speak to so many issues. I'd love for you to share with people out there, because that was a wonderful bio. There was a lot there. Tell us what brought you to become such an incredible journalist. You have so much experience, your background. Tell us a little bit about that story and some of the places that you've been that I think are quite interesting.
So I think, I get asked this question quite a bit, like, what made you decide to go into journalism? And, it's a tough career. It's especially being an international journalist or covering terrorism and covering war. And for a lot of us, we stumbled on it, But for me, it was my love of people, and in a way, it was a way for me to serve my country too. My father was a Marine. He served in World War II and Korea. My mother came from Cuba. She was an immigrant in the late 1960s to the United States on the Johnson Freedom flights. And my parents raised me to appreciate and love this nation more than anything. And, for me I think when I was in college and, and struggling in the beginning as a young lady, it wasn't like something I had actually picked, Rebecca. It wasn't like I sat there and thought, I'm gonna be an international journalist and I'm gonna go to Afghanistan and cover the war and I'll go to Iraq. It was just kind of who I am, right? The way I was brought up. So after 9/11, particularly after 9/11, I remember thinking to myself, I'd grown up in Saudi Arabia. My dad had taken me there as a child. He worked for Lockheed Martin. I remember, living in the kingdom and remember the diversity, the difference of life there for me as versus, children that I would see, children from Yemen, children from when we traveled to Africa, the disparity between different groups of people. And also the fact that a lot of times I would come back to the United States even as a young kid and people wouldn't even know what I was talking about. They'd be like, where do you live? And I'd be like, oh, Saudi Arabia. Where is that? Because back then it was like, nobody knew. I'm like, oh, where the genies live. That's where that place, where Aladdin lives. And so after September 11th and that massive loss of life, and I remember my mom and I on the phone. My father had passed away when I was quite young. I was just turned 13. My dad died. We came back from Saudi Arabia. My mom couldn't save him. He had cancer, obviously. So many people afflicted, And she ended up having to go back to work in a factory. I lived in a pretty impoverished community at that point in time in Montclair, at the maybe lower middle class. And my mom worked really, really hard to raise me and my brother. Moving forward, September 11th happened, and I thought, I've got to go back to school and finish. I had already, been married. I had my son. I was thinking, like, what can I do for my country? And I remember thinking to myself, I love to travel. I love the work. I love to tell people stories, and that's what I'm going to do. I went back to college. I got picked up right away by a medium-sized newspaper at the Daily Bulletin in Ontario, California, and I started breaking stories. I started covering like a little city, and then I said, you know what, I want to find out what's going on in our community, at least with drugs and gangs and young people shooting each other, and we saw a significant amount of that in Los Angeles, in East LA. I felt like it wasn't just affecting our impoverished communities, but it was actually affecting all the surrounding communities. I started breaking stories. I told my editors I want to go to the border. I think that the drugs are obviously coming from Mexico. We need to cover that. I also believe that there's a national security threat along that border that is going to affect every American that we're not paying attention to. And that was a big deal during the 9/11 Commission, right? One of the things that they said was we weren't sharing information. We weren't focused on what was going on. So when I got to the border, I started breaking stories. Make a long story short, I ended up in Washington, D.C. Jerry Sieber with the Washington Times kept reading my stories, and he said, could you slow down? Could you give an old guy a break? And I don't know if you guys know Jerry Sieber and Bill Gertz, but they were, to me, and they still are, two great reporters and mentors for me. And I went to Washington, D.C., but I told the editors at the Washington Times, I said, I'm not going to come here unless you can make me the Pentagon correspondent, because I want to cover terrorism, and I want to cover the war in Afghanistan. I want to cover the war in Iraq. And they agreed, which was surprising. I was the first, I think, female reporter that they decided to send overseas with that news agency. And I spent the next 7 years while I was there covering, there and the Washington Examiner, actually covering the war and traveling multiple times into the region, mainly Afghanistan, but Iraq multiple times, covering our soldiers and everybody else. For me, it was just a progression, Rebecca. I think with anybody in anybody's life, I love what I do, and I fell into it, and I believed in it, and I believe in bringing the American people the truth, and I believe it's our duty when we see something to say it and to share those stories so that our electorate can make the best decisions possible when it comes to the voting booth, right? And what I've seen now, and what I've seen over the last 4 years is frightening, actually, what I've seen happen to our media and what I've seen happening in our country.
I think that you are in such a unique and great position to share a perspective with us. I want to first remind folks, the magazine, I want to talk a little bit with Sara about some of Biden's foreign failures. I want to talk to you about Afghanistan. This magazine is such a great tool. It's a great guide. It's important what you just said, that we have the information, that we share the information, that we tell the stories. It's the reason why we still print the magazine. We think it's that important that you have these stories. And one of our writers, Daniel Roman, one of my favorite writers, did a really wonderful piece in the last issue. And he talked about a world in chaos, Joe Biden's domestic failures and foreign failures. I want to talk to you a little bit about your perspective on some of these foreign failures. What brought America to the precipice? What happened that sort of gave Putin, emboldened Putin to make the decision to enter into Ukraine, to do what he's doing? And I think that was Afghanistan. I think that the disastrous pullout was a national humiliation. It showed America's weakness. Can you tell us, from your perspective, how dangerous was that decision that he made? And do you also believe that it is precisely why Putin made certain decisions at this time? Because if we remember that when Donald Trump was in office, right, that was about 4 years where Russia was not bothering its neighbors. Suddenly Biden comes in and everything changes. So tell us a little bit about what you think that pullout did.
Well, it was the trajectory of everything. I mean, Vladimir Putin saw the weakness. President Xi saw the weakness in the Biden administration. And not only that, the actions that the Biden administration took in Afghanistan were gut-wrenching. I mean, it felt like somebody had kicked me in the stomach, let alone, let me back it up. Many of you probably don't know, but my husband's a veteran from Afghanistan and Iraq, and he's retired, special ops, went back, fought, and in 2011 was wounded and was blinded in Afghanistan. We lost a lot of good friends there, not only journalists who I had worked with, but we lost people that we loved dearly. Our best friends gave their lives there. The last place they saw was that region of the world. We always knew that we would be withdrawing. That wasn't the issue. That wasn't the issue. But the way the Biden administration handled this was abhorrent. In fact, there were people on flights, literally with our intelligence agencies and with our military, heading to Afghanistan, believing they were going to be there for a 3-month stint, working. When they landed, they were told, we're shutting down. Everybody's leaving. To the point where the Biden administration had literally turned Kabul over to the Taliban, armed the Taliban with over, and this is, can be disputed, but let's be frank, with over $80 billion in US military equipment, and also a lot of the, what they call Warsaw equipment, the Russian equipment. I know the lights keep going up and down, huh? Are you guys seeing that? I'm not pretending to ignore that.
Are you?
And by the way, it's okay. I can handle. I just want to let you know that I do know that too. So it's all right. Everybody's like looking around, like, oh, it's going up and down. And I was actually gonna tell Stephen Moore, there is one thing that Biden has done that's amazing, and it's just one thing. And everybody keeps saying this, and no one said that here today, so I'm gonna say it. It's unified us in such a way. Our nation has some unity. I'm gonna have to just throw that out there. But the way that it happened was unbelievable to me. Here's a terrorist organization, right? Run and operating with Al-Qaeda, who attacked us, and the Haqqani network out of Pakistan. I had spent a lot of time in that region of the world. And these leaders within the Taliban are people that you can negotiate with. These imams or these leaders, they're basically criminals. They're criminals, they're also ideological, and they're very, very dangerous. And when we turned over Kabul to the Taliban, we basically not only gave up that region to the enemy, we gave it up to enemy states as well. We endangered the lives of our servicemen and women who were there. We endangered the lives of the Afghan people that stood by our side. Some of them who fought, I watched. Nobody can ever tell me any different. I watched our men and women spill blood there. I watched Afghan men and women spill blood there to fight for this, to fight for the ideals, that principles that our nation stands on. So I do believe that when that happened and the trajectory changed, Vladimir Putin and President Xi and others in the world, and North Korea and other parts of the world like Venezuela, and everybody was like, this is it. This is the time to seize power, to expand our power geopolitically across the board. And I believe that when Vladimir Putin did make that move, and remember, they already had tested this administration in the past. Even in Syria, when President Obama had said, I'm drawing, this is the red line. If you use chemical weapons, we are not going to accept that. That is going to be a red line in the sand for us. We're going to target you. We're going to get you back. Nothing happened. We were supposed to take out Syrian President Assad. Nothing happened. So people had already tested this administration out. They already saw its weakness. They saw its weakness with Israel. They saw its weakness, as far as like aiding our ally, our only real ally in the Middle East. They didn't do it, and they didn't do it now. And also Iran, which I think we can't forget. Right now, we basically armed the world's biggest terrorist organization. Right now, we've basically given South Asia to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, to other groups in such a way that we are potentially at danger, our assets overseas. And if you talk to anybody in the intelligence community or who has worked operations overseas, they would tell you we have never been in such a dire predicament. And all of this is within a year,
And
of
avoidable.
having. Completely avoidable, because there are ways to pull out of the region. There are ways to handle it. I remember, really quick, fun story. I don't know if President Trump will be upset, but this was just a little conversation he and I had once. But he was right. I was at the White House one time, and he leaned over, and we were sitting there at a table, and he wanted to ask me, because my husband was, a war veteran, he said, why are we still there? Why are we in Afghanistan? Why can't I get an answer from anybody at the Pentagon on how to win this thing? And I think the American people were harmed not only by the 20-year-long war, but the inability. I'm not going to put all the blame on Biden. How he withdrew was all of his fault. But we spent 20 years in a vicious cycle in Afghanistan where you'd get new ISAF commanders, new people coming in every 6 months. Everything would change. We didn't know what we were doing anymore. We didn't even know how to handle that. And having that kind of failed foreign policy and the inability to fix that has put our nation really at risk. And I've never seen us more at risk than we are today under Biden.
So then Steve Moore said earlier he spoke about China being our number one threat. And
Right.
when I think about the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, I can't help but think, what is China thinking? And how might this impact their next move? Speak to us, if you will, from your perspective, when we look at China, what are some things that we should really know about, be concerned about, be aware about? What's happening?
Look what we've already been through. We've already been through 2 years of a complete, called Black Swan event, something none of us expected. Over 6 million lives lost. COVID has changed our lives, lockdowns in the United States. Just look at what's happening in China right now. Look at how the Chinese government treats its own people. Shanghai locked down, people being welded into their own apartment buildings, not being allowed out. Some people jumping from buildings. How are we going to handle China if we ourselves don't face the reality? If we continue to do, and it's going to be hard, but if we continue to do business with China as normal, then we are only selling our own national security out, right? China produces the majority of our antibiotics. China produces the majority of our equipment for military. Can you imagine if we have to get our military ready, geared, the PPE equipment, and then their camo and everything else, and we need to order that from China before we can what? Go to war with China? Hi, China. President Xi, guess what? We need to move our troops into this part of Africa, but first we need to order our equipment from you. China is spreading globally. And it's not the Chinese people. I believe the Chinese people have a rich history. China has a rich history. It's a beautiful nation. Nothing against the Chinese people. This is about the Chinese Communist Party. And its tentacles are spread across the globe. They are entrenched in areas you cannot even imagine. Look at Africa. Just look at what they're doing in Africa. Look at what they're doing right here in the Western Hemisphere. I was in Guatemala right before COVID, and one time during COVID. So it was about 4 times in the last maybe 2 years, right? And I remember getting in my hotel room and looking, and I was on a high-level floor in Guatemala City, and I'm looking across, and the floor in the building right across from me, it was run by a Chinese company. And their lights would come on late at night, and everybody was working diligently in this building. And I asked one of the guys that I knew down there, and actually I'll tell you who he is, Mario Duarte. He headed intelligence for Guatemala up until after Jimmy Morales. And I said, hey, Mario, I said, what's going on across the way? Like there's this commotion, everybody's working late into the night. He said, oh, that's a Chinese company that works with the Chinese government. And I said, oh, interesting, what are they doing? Oh, well, a lot of these companies are coming in, they're gonna build roads for us, they're gonna put in all kinds of new, infrastructure, buildings. The Chinese are building infrastructure in our hemisphere. They're putting up satellite communication systems. We have evidence now that the Wuhan laboratory, not 100%, but that there is enough information to know that what was happening in the Wuhan laboratory with gain-of-function research, with the COVID virus, is enough to potentially make us, I would hope, investigate whether or not that particular COVID-19 virus or SARS-V virus came from some kind of work that was being conducted in that laboratory, right? And when you think of what's happened to the Uyghurs in China, the poor Uyghurs who are the women are being sterilized, they're being taken to camps. The people in China, even their own people, look at how they are being treated. Well, if you have an amoral government that views life as so little, imagine if they do that to their own people, what they'd be willing to do to us.
Yeah.
We're nothing. We're a means to an end, and I'm not an expert in, the Chinese Marxists or how they operate, but I would assume based on Unrestricted Warfare, the book I read, that the Chinese military is very capable. And you know what they say? We don't need to war with you. We can basically win you without lifting a weapon. We can break your nation economically, socially, morally, turn you against each other. And all I have to say is, well, look what's happening to us now, right? So is China a threat? Yes, I believe China is a direct threat. I like to have my friend Gordon Chang on, and a lot of people don't. Some people that, focus on China or want to, don't think he's a little extreme, but he's not. Gordon's right. And and a lot of people have to realize, we need to wake up. We need to start putting our nation first. It's the reason why I believe Donald Trump was so successful in China with President Xi. I believe, like we were talking, there is a certain sense of respect when somebody puts their nation first and negotiates from a position of power and not from a position of weakness. And it doesn't mean we have to go to war with them. It means we have to keep our eyes open and realize, last but not least, and you may take me to the border on this one, fentanyl. We lost 107,000 people to overdoses that are not junkie related, guys. This isn't about junkies dying in the streets or, like we remember kind of like the 70s, remember with junkies on, in an alley. This is about counterfeit pills coming into our nation that look identical to the Percocet that your doctor gives you, that look identical to the Oxycontins that are prescribed by your doctors, identical to the Adderalls, and they are on our streets. And guess what? They're not laced. I'm going to take away the laced word. A lot of cops use that too. Oh, it's laced with fentanyl. No, it's basically 2.5 or 2 grams, over 40% of what's been seized by the DEA of fentanyl. It'll kill you. It'll kill a grown man. So who's supplying the precursor chemicals to Mexico? China.
There you go.
You don't think they know what's happening in our country? When China supplies the precursor chemicals to Mexican drug cartels, they know it ends up in the hands of the cartels, mix it, they move it into the United States. Those pills end up in the streets. We lost 2 kids in Prince William County in high school. They took 2 Percocets. One of them, each took 1 Percocet. They both died. They OD'd in the bathroom in Prince William County. People are finding their kids dead all the time. Parents are finding their loved ones dead all the time. It's a nightmare.
It's gotta stop.
It's a nightmare.
And
And they're laundering the money for the drug cartels too. Put that in your hat. When the money goes back, the Mexican cartels don't need to worry anymore about whether or not we're gonna seize it. They're laundering it straight through the Chinese banks.
Yeah. And I do want to pivot now to the domestic side of things, the domestic failures really that we've seen under this Biden administration. We poll our members. We ask them what issues are most important to them. And this border wall, this wide open border wall, we hear the administration telling us that the border is closed. This is another lie. I think they want people to think that it's closed. But we see what's happening, the number of migrants that are coming over. It is mind-boggling that we have a president and a vice president that have not gone down to the border. It's mind-boggling that they could say that they care about American people when they must see these statistics. They know what's happening. They've got to be doing this with some kind of intent. What do? We can't wait 3 years for another president before something happens. This is something I think we're making a lot of conversations like this are
Right.
important. Sharing the truth, electing the right people. We've got heroes in Texas, for example. We were down there, AMAC was down there. But what do you say when people on the left say the border is closed, or when the president is saying we don't have a problem, they want us to ignore it? How dangerous is that really? I mean, I see that as the enemy within.
Oh, absolutely. And they think we're stupid, or they think we're just not going to do anything about it. There's two things there. And I agree with you. I think that what we're seeing at the border, I used to think, is this just bad policy? Like, what's going on here? Like, how can I be down here at the border and see hundreds of people crossing the border, sometimes very ill, sometimes being trafficked, young children. I remember back in 2014 when over 64,000 unaccompanied minors were coming across, and I thought, oh, it can't get any worse than this. And sure enough, it got far worse than that. In fact, I'm going Monday morning to the border. I'm going to be covering that for Sean all next week because we have groups of 700 literally crossing every day just in Starr County alone, Texas. Eagle Pass, groups of 200 every hour. I mean, we don't even know now if it's between 11,000 to 15,000 people a day or more that are coming into the United States. And I used to think, is this just terrible policy? And now I'm like, no, they want this to happen. They want it. Yeah. And they think that we're not going to stand up because, oh, nobody's going to really know what's going on at the border, right? Nobody's going to really pay attention to that until it shows up in their communities, until you're, in Maine and you're like, who are all these people getting off the bus? And what's going on? And why is, and let's be honest, there are good people there. I speak Spanish. There are people that come in, maybe they've been told the big lie, we want you to come. They're on social media. The drug cartels are literally using the Biden administration policy for advertisement on social media to recruit people to come to the United States. Yeah. There are NGOs that are doing the same thing. You're sending money thinking, oh, I'm going to be helping the poor migrants, get clothing and maybe find a hospital or get their vaccinations. No, you're helping them actually get to the United States. It is like we are part of the criminal organization. Imagine that. Our government, and this is what Border Patrol agents will say all the time, I feel like I'm the last leg in the trafficking of a human being. This is what the morale of our Border Patrol right now and our law enforcement, thank God right now with Texas Governor Greg Abbott and what he's doing, right? Because, and some people say it's not even enough, but I mean, he has the DPS out there and they are standing guard with our Border Patrol, and DPS is really doing the job. They're saying, like, look, we're gonna send people back. We're not gonna let them in. We're gonna build a fence. But right now, our government's policy is an open borders policy that is you're not only seeing it in Central America, Mexico, Venezuela, South America, everybody there is hearing about this. They're on their way up. We got thousands of people sitting right now. I can tell you, I've seen the pictures and the videos. I have a friend right now in Panama who's in the Darien Gap, and there are people coming up by the thousands. Somalia, Afghanistan. I saw a whole group of guys from Afghanistan. I can't believe they made it that far. Where else was interesting? Ukraine, China, all across the board, just ready to head in Title 42. And I don't know if something's changed today with Title 42, if there's been a court decision on Title 42, but it's expected to be removed Monday. So get ready, because the Department of Homeland Security is expecting, and this is Biden's Department of Homeland Security, right? So 18,000 plus a day once Title 42 goes. And I don't want it to seem like yes, it is a direct threat to us on our national level because we have a wide open border and we have people coming in from nations we can't even vet. Let me give you an example. If you get a bunch of people from Syria or from some other part of the world, they're considered special interest aliens, SIAs, right? So SIAs have a different connotation because their nation is associated with terrorism. So if I get a bunch of people coming across and I really don't know where they're from, I really don't speak their language, they're not carrying any identifiers on them, I can't hold them, I can't send them back, because where am I going to send them to? I can't send them in Mexico. Mexico's going to say, I'm not going to take that guy. He's not Mexican. And you're like, well, where are you from? And they're like, over there. Maybe Syria. Maybe Iraq. And you can only hold them for so long, and they're not pinging on any database, which means that, as far as you know, they're not terrorists, or they're not on a watch list. What do they do with them? You know what they do with them? They let them go. With a report, a notice to appear, if you're lucky. If you're lucky, and even when they put those little bands around there, they're going to GPS locate you. Now they're giving them phones. Do you guys know you're paying for a bunch of phones at the border? So all these phones, you know what they're doing with them? They're throwing them away in the trash as they walk away from ICE and Border Patrol, because they don't want to be tracked. So people are just throwing them away because they're not going to report. The majority of them will never report to court. So now I want you to think about all the people that have just come in, and those are the ones that we know about, not the gotaways. And imagine what's going to happen in the future if it only takes one or one small group. If there is another terrorist attack in this nation, and God forbid, thousands of people die again, or more, or we don't know. We're just guessing right now, right? Who's going to take the blame for that? Are they going to have another 9/11 commission? Are we going to be debating how we didn't really know that this was going to happen? So there's two things that are going on here. One, you have a lot of people in Washington who know that they have completely failed on our security, so they don't want to take responsibility for it. So they're going to pretend like they didn't see that happen, and they're going to pass the buck over to someone else. And the other thing is, it seems, the Democratic Party and others want a big new voter base.
It sure does.
I mean, I'm not trying to, I'm not making something up here. There's a reason why they're allowing this to happen. There's no nation on earth that would allow this to happen to their own nation. No nation on earth. We are not protecting the sovereignty. And by the way, we're doing a disservice to the people that are being trafficked into this country, because a lot of them are, put into bondage by these cartels. Some of the young girls, some of the young children are sex trafficked in the United States. We know we've lost a lot of children on that train through Central America and Mexico. Children have disappeared. No one's ever going to search for them. And I've seen women and children just so desperate and so lost by the time they get here that they have to be taken immediately for medical aid and medical care. And I can't even begin to tell you how many bodies are found along that border and how many people are going to die this summer because they're going to get lost in these really terrible environments. So all of these terrible things, right, are not being addressed by this administration. And not one of them has really been there. Not even Mayorkas. He's landed, I've literally seen this, he's landed on a plane, he's gotten out, he's talked to the Border Patrol, and then I've waved at him as he walks back onto the plane, and he takes off. I'm like, what about the border,
Yeah.
What happened?
Boy, that's right.
The border's closed, yeah, exactly. Well, it's certainly closed for the Biden administration, and they want you to believe that. And I think that's why it's important that I continue to go there and continue to show you on video in real time what's happening, because the American people deserve to know the truth. And guess what? We deserve to hold accountable these guys in office right now who are putting all of our lives at risk and our children's lives at risk. And if anything happens, it's documented, and they won't be able to hide it anymore.
That's right. Very good point.
All right.
We have time for, I think, another question. Sara, what do you think is going to drive people to vote this November 2022? And do you see and predict this great red wave as well? I think that we see that that's what's happening because people are really waking up. People are saying enough is enough. You know, people who aren't normally paying a lot of attention to day-to-day politics are recognizing that there are people out there that are crazy, and so many people that really want to ruin America. They want to rule their way or ruin America as we know it. More and more people are seeing that. We saw that in Loudoun County with critical race theory. We see what's happening now at the Supreme Court. Second Amendment right is so important. There are some big cases in the Supreme Court on the Second Amendment. So I'm wondering, in your view, an open border, just disastrous foreign policy, what do you think is going to make people go to vote this year? Some of the major issues that you see.
You know, it's interesting you asked that, Rebecca, because I ask that every guest I have on my podcast. So, you know, it's the Sarah Carter Show. For anybody who wants to download, I got great guests. I've had James O'Keefe,
it's a great
Gordon
show.
Chang, Devin Nunes. I try to bring the people that I think are changing or making a difference, you know, in our communities and in our country on the show. And I ask that, and I absolutely believe that I believe in the American people. I believe in the American system. Nobody is going to get me to change that belief. I believe that if we get out and we vote, we will make a difference, right? I know it's hard for so many people right now, especially after the last election. There was so much division. Some people just lost all faith in our system. And I know it's tough. Believe me, I know it's tough. I spent 4 years working on the story with President Trump, John Solomon and I, breaking story after story after story to expose the weaponization of our, you know, agencies inside the United States. And I thought, is anyone going to do anything? Is our DOJ going to do anything? I mean, there are parts of me that sometimes feel like, is this hopeless? Have we changed? Has our nation shifted? And then I step back and I see all the great Americans. I travel through Ohio, Wyoming, you know, every state in the nation that I work, California, believe it or not. And there's so many great Americans and so many people that are standing up and saying, you know what, no more. We might have been a silent majority for a little while, but we're not going to be silent anymore. We're not going to fight, and I'm not asking, we're going to take it to the battle. The battle goes to the ballot box, right? That's where we take our fight. That's where we take the battle. We take it to the ballot box. We take it to our community, to our schools. We say, you know what? I see what you're teaching my kid, and guess what? No more. You're not going to take my tax dollars for me to teach them some Marxist rhetoric. It's not going to happen. And I think the more that Americans speak up, the more we are going to win back our nation. And it hasn't gone so far yet that I've given up. I hope it hasn't gone so far yet that you've given up. I am a full believer that our founding fathers established a nation that is the shining beacon of hope for the entire world. And really, God help us if we lose this country. God help us. I mean, I'm certainly not going to let the crazies run the funny farm, right? Is that not PC? But, you know, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to fight for my country. And I'm going to do that the way our founding fathers asked us to do that. And that is by going out, going to the ballot box, speaking out, standing for truth and everything, and not being afraid to stand up to those people that want to take it from us, whether that's China or Russia, or whether that's people within our own government who are, you know, changing those principles and trying to alter the future of this country. You know, it's going to be up to every one of us. If we don't fight for it, nobody else will. Trust me. They'll just be happy to watch our demise.
Yeah. Sarah, it's been such a pleasure having you. We are so lucky to have you as a friend of AMAC.
You.
Thank you for your time with us.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. You're awesome.
Thank you. And I love Sarah's podcast. It is truly great. You have exciting guests on your show.
Yeah, I love it.
And you educate. You really bring a perspective that most people just don't see things from your position, because you've been there. You've done so much. And I want to thank you. Keep up the good fight.
Oh yeah, you guys download the Sarah Carter Show. It's so great. I'm not just saying that. My guests are the show. I have everybody from leaders on Capitol Hill in the Senate all the way to Lou Elizondo, who headed the UFO program at the Pentagon. So it's very fun.
And lots on that, too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sara Carter,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
And that was it, ladies and gentlemen. Sara Carter, one of our dear friends. Tune in for more of AMAC's podcast, Better for America. And if you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, be sure to do that. We look forward to having you back with us again next time. Have a great day, everyone.
You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.